When companies get in trouble, it's easy for the management team to look to lay blame, whether the our employees were too expensive or inefficient or needed to change faster. That's management's responsibility to make those decisions.
Ed, thank you so much for joining us here today. Snowing in New York right now. Last night I was trying to figure out how to get my 3 kids to 3 different schools on a snow day in the morning. I started thinking about all of the logistical challenges you must go through to move, about 500,000 people a day? Is that what it is? So let me tick off a bunch. You tell me what I'm missing here. You obviously have weather. You've got maintenance issues. I assume personnel is a massive one, how to get people where they need to go. Political issues, any kind of natural disasters, big events that might step up. So what else am I missing that takes up your brain to think, like, how am I going to get these people around every day?
Yeah, what you described is the challenge of the airline business. It's, there's a lot of things that seem to be outside your control. And it's one of the reasons why the airline business has always been not just volatile from a day-to-day perspective, but also from an investor perspective. And there's been a lot of disruption through the industry. And about 10 years ago, we really decided to focus on controlling those things that you can control and stop complaining about those things that are outside of your control. And what we found is if you focus on the things that you do control, you run a much better airline. So, a day like today where it is snowing here in New York, we'll have a few cancellations. But the vast majority of the people will get to where they need to be, whether it's through technology, whether it's through advanced preparation, data analytics.
I've heard you talk in the past about managing a workforce that is largely, they don't work from home, but they work without managers around them. How do you think about putting trust and leadership in people and having them make decisions?
A lot of it is through, as you say, not just putting the trust in them, but having them feel like management's got their back. When you give your employees the trust, it's amazing what can happen. I think, again, one of the challenges that we faced in our industry back 10, 20 years ago, at least at Delta, was that the management team tried to micromanage. When problems arose, 9/11, other really tragic events happened, the management team bunkered down and tried to micromanage and tell employees what they ought to be doing, when the reality is that we probably should have done just the opposite, pulled up and let them do what they do so well and reinforce the culture and the values and the trust in them. And it makes the world a difference. In fact, that's what we've done.
How do you change a culture from being a micromanaging culture to putting in frameworks and letting people make their own decisions?
Well, the first thing we did, and we started right after we went through a difficult restructuring process, is we gathered our people together, about 200-300 at a time, and it took us about a year and a half to get through it. And we'd spend a day and a half with our people.
This is executives down?
Executives. I was at the time, I was the chief financial officer of the company. Either myself or our chief operating officer would personally lead each session. We wouldn't have big PowerPoints. We wouldn't get into a big corporate venue. We'd actually go to some place where it would disarm people. There'd be curtains, there'd be dark lights, there'd be some music playing, and get people just to understand that we have one more shot, which was important. But the more important message, it wasn't their fault. When companies get in trouble, it's easy for the management team to look to lay blame, whether our employees were too expensive or inefficient or needed to change faster. That's management's responsibility to make those decisions. Our people were doing an awesome job with what they had. In fact, they kept us out of the ditch. And it took a couple of years before people saw that we were serious about it. And then we went through a merger. We bought Northwest and did that again. It's not just words, it's actions. One of the things that was really important that frustrated our employees the most is that we weren't providing them the tools and the equipment and the reliability to do a great job. The investment, not in them financially as much as investing in their workplace, investing in giving them the opportunity to shine.
I know you're a big believer in Net Promoter Score and NPS.
Absolutely.
Do you do the same thing with your employees? Are you seeing how they feel about the airline?
Yeah. No, we take pulse surveys every quarter in terms of where their minds. And if you can't have great Net Promoter Scores if you don't have great people in terms of their confidence and belief in the mission. of where you're going. Our founder, Mr. Woolman, said, if you take care of your employees will take care of your customers.
This is the fifth year that you're going to pay out over $1 billion?
Fifth year over $1 billion. So we're going to pay $1.3 billion on Thursday of this week, Valentine's Day. No company anywhere that we found has done $1 billion once on a broad-based scale. This will be our fifth year in a row, and we're going to throw a party worthy of $1.3 billion.
Well, Wall Street watches very closely what the airlines do. Do you feel any pressure to ratchet that back?
Wall Street knows that this is what we do. It's part of the pact that we have with our employees. Our employees, when we went through a restructuring, took massive pay cuts. Up to 50%, 50, and lost benefits, and some lost pensions, and so those same people that went through that process, to bring them back around and to bring the morale and the spirit to where today it's the best it's ever been in the 90-year history of our company, has been quite a feat. But part of that was, again, the commitment we made with them is that when things got better, that they'd be the first recipients, because they made the personal sacrifice and the investment back into the company. So 15% effectively of the profits of the company go back to the employees first. Management team doesn't participate in that. It's all just the frontline employees, and it's the pact we made with them. And while I'll be honest with you, I never thought we'd get to the point where we're paying out billions and billions of dollars. It's the best day of my year, because I get to spend time thanking not just our employees, but thanking our customers.
You're in a customer service business. You think a lot about your consumer brand. But the airline industry itself is not a well-regarded industry. When you look at surveys, it ranks somewhere around the Postal Service and health insurance. Do you feel like you're able to escape the halo or reverse halo of the airline industry?
We manage for Delta, but of course, we live in a bigger pond. That's the airline transportation sector, and we understand that. And again, there's elements of the travel experience that are a hassle. The security environment was never designed for what we go through today, with TSA and the queues for when it was built 50 years ago to what we have to operate today. The volume of people that are accessing. When this industry was deregulated 35 years ago, it's taken years. It's been pretty disruptive, but it was a massive success. It's democratized travel to the point where everyone can actually access it at a price point that makes sense for them. Growing up, I never flew on airplanes. I didn't fly an airplane until I was 25 years old. It just wasn't what we did. We didn't have the means. And now that I look at my kids, and not just my kids, but just the demographics of our population, people incorporate that into their lifestyle. So it's had a massive effect in terms of what's been positive for consumers, but at the same time, it's put pressure in other ways, and that hassle factor. So we set out on a mission a few years ago. What I call it is trying to bring the magic back into what we do. So we reject the notion that air travel is something that must be endured. And really what we want to embrace is something to look forward to on your way to the journey. So we're investing billions of dollars in new planes, new airports, new technologies, making certain our people are there, designed to serve and to bring hospitality back.
And can you do that at the same time when that budget airlines are nickel and diming people and thinking about ways to cut and make the experiences as absolutely no frills as possible? Yeah. So that you end up with these two entirely different classes. It works in hotels where I'm willing to spend a lot more to stay in a nice hotel room, but you're still fighting for every dollar of a ticket, right? Does that change at some point?
It has and it hasn't. What you've described is the great marketer's dilemma of our industry, where essentially you've got 200 people on board an aircraft, all who within 50, 100, 200 feet of each other gets the same basic experience. Yet you need to communicate and let people understand the value at different price points along the way, and how do people feel like they're getting what they want So you're right. We have a product called Basic Economy that if all you want is the lowest fare possible to compete with the low cost carriers, we have a product for you. It's not the entire cabin. It may not carry some of the benefits that our higher value products offer, all the way up to Delta One. If you're traveling on an international trip, we'll have an enclosed suite for you, in the ability to have a private experience and a private journey, not too different from almost a private jet experience going internationally, and all areas in between. We've got 4 or 5 different broad product categories, and it's working. It's working.
I'd love to talk a little bit about your career at Delta. You left Delta in 2004.
I did.
And we're gone for about 6 months. Would you walk through what made you decide to leave?
I had joined Delta in the late 90s when the company was doing well. It was the technology boom 20 years ago. It was the Silicon gold rush that was coming back around again. And 9/11 changed everything. The business collapsed. Our international travel went away overnight. Massive layoffs of people. And it threw the industry into a tailspin, and it was one that, candidly, I don't think the management team at Delta at the time had the experience, foresight to kind of know what to do and how to handle it. And I was pretty vocal about my disenchantment about some of the decisions that were being taken, and felt that our people were being left out of the decision-making process. Our frontline team, they had some real concerns, and my voice couldn't be heard. And sometimes when you can't be heard, you let your feet do the talking. And I left, and people knew that why I left, and I didn't leave to go do something else. In fact, I didn't have a job at that time. I just quit because I just wasn't, my values just didn't align with where we were going. Did find a job, wasn't concerned about that. But 6 months later, our CEO, Jerry Grinstein, called me back and asked me to come back to the company. And what it did is it allowed me to have the voice into the process that I always wanted to have. I didn't want to leave the company, and he knew I didn't want to leave. But it gave me the opportunity then to actually put into motion some of the thoughts we had to bring our people back, and to kind of fight through the experience we're having, and create what today is, I think, arguably, one of the greatest transformation stories in corporate America. So but had I not left, it wouldn't have been possible for me anyway to have had that impact.
How do you encourage your employees, your executives, to have that same kind of voice?
Yeah, well, dialogue is critical. One of the things I've been talking about in communications is not just how you communicate, it's also how you listen. And listening is probably much more powerful than what you say, is to be able to hear. We are a consumer brand, and everyone's got an opinion. And those opinions aren't wrong. Those opinions are opinions. And what you have to do is you have to take the collective view of those opinions in terms of how you face the market. It's not as if we're some old line industrial company that's manufacturing something that is, we put our face on our brand 200 million times a year. And those opinions are really important. So yes, I'd be disappointed if someone felt that they couldn't have their voice heard and had to leave. That wasn't my issue. My voice was heard. It just wasn't being received. I mean, people wanted to go in a different way.
One of the moves that you made that brought you into a lot of headlines was rejecting a discount for the NRA right after the Parkland shootings. Most CEOs who talk about this don't actually pay a penalty for it. You lost about $40 million in tax cuts.
Yeah, tax exemption. Yeah.
Tax exemptions. As you look back now, some distance has been put on that. Do you still feel good about that decision? Do you wish you had done it a different way? Do you wish you had never done it at all? How do you feel about it?
I look back, and yes, there are learnings. There's learnings in everything you do, but I wouldn't have changed a thing, honestly. It was one of those things that when you see it, you knew that your brand shouldn't have been where it was, which was in the middle of this debate around a discount. We can't be seen as being advocates in any way of a group that had the really negative, divisive rhetoric that we were facing as a country at that time. And so while the decision wasn't easy, it was a quick one.
You've had an interesting career. You started as an accountant and as an auditor.
As an accountant, yeah.
And you worked your way up on the finance side of the business before becoming the CEO. So it's not a traditional business school, whatever the steps are to get there. What kind of advice do you give people on how they should think about their career path?
Well, the first and One of the most important pieces of advice I give people is to surround yourself with great people, with great mentors, with great environments, with the companies that you work for. Make certain they're companies that you believe in and the mission and the values of that. I tell my own kids that, today is that, don't be chasing the last dollar, chase the opportunity.